Hello. I read a book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. This is a non-fictional book which narrates a series of case studies concerning patients with neurological disorders. One case speaks of a patient who suffers from visual agnosia, a rare brain condition characterized by the complete or partial inability to recognize people, objects, places, etc. by sight. Before I expand further on this disorder, I need you to remember that the translation of agnosia in Arabic is al-amah al-basari. Moving forward, the patient in the book is asked to identify a red rose, but instead of naming it as is, he describes it as follows. I quote, "About 6 inches in length, a convoluted red form with a linear green attachment." Likewise, he refers to a glove as a continuous surface enfolded on itself. It appears to have 5 outpouchings. End quote. Moreover, here is a visual example of how a patient who is not part of the book with visual agnosia perceives an object. In this illustration, the patient John created the drawing on the right, a copy of the owl on the left. John had no idea what he was duplicating, but the fact that he was able to do so demonstrated that his ability to see was still intact. Therefore, visual agnosia is a condition that affects how your brain processes what you see. Your eyesight works correctly, but areas of the brain that process information from your eyes are impaired. Agnosia is a Greek term pronounced as agnosia, which means unknown or the absence of knowledge. As a matter of fact, the word agnosia is not bound to the neurological aspect only, but also extends to theology, which is the study of the nature of God and religious faith, practice, and experience. According to Cambridge Dictionary, an agnostic is someone who does not know or believes that it is impossible to know if a God exists. وترجمة agnostic الحرفية هي لا غنوصي أو عمهي. عمهي أصلها عمها، فنقول وجد نفسه في عمه أي في تردد وحيرة، وعمه البصيرة هو عمى العقل والفطنة. I've had conversations with agnostics before, and their mind is quite fascinating, not in a flattering manner to say the least. What I most noticed is that the manner in which they discuss ideas is obnoxiously engulfed with a sense of mockery, incessant pride and denial, yet deep underlying fright. Some of them are egotistic, claim full knowledge of the topic, and strictly counterattack any comeback with a full stream of what yours truly would refer to as bullcrap. See, I acknowledge that with the passage of time, each person develops a certain set of ideals, perspectives, and beliefs depending on their genetics, upbringing, environment, and interaction with societal norms. However, to be human is to be aware, and having the ability to argue should be tied with a sense of elevated dignity to discuss with honor rather than with degradation. In the book Theologia Mystica, written by the Greek author Dionysius the Areopagite, he states the following. I quote, "Unknowing or agnosia is not ignorance or absence of knowledge as ordinarily understood, but rather the realization that no finite knowledge can fully know the infinite one, and that therefore he is only truly to be approached by agnosia, or by that which is beyond and above knowledge." End quote. Notice how in this paragraph Dionysius associates humans with finite knowledge, which is the reality of all beings due to their inability to attain the full or infinite knowledge of the world. Therefore, since we cannot seem to draw the line of knowledge saturation, is the knowledge of those who do not know if a God exists sufficient for them to identify as agnostics? Of course, the same question can be applied to believers. One could ask, do believers have enough knowledge to believe in God? The answer is presented by the English philosopher Alan Watts, who discussed the idea of God's existence and perception in one of his lectures titled Relevance of Oriental Philosophy. I quote, "So this is among many reasons why people are saying God is dead. It's very inconvenient to have the kind of God who is this authoritarian boss of the world, prying down over your shoulder all the time and knowing your inmost thoughts and judging you. It's a very uncomfortable feeling, and everybody's happy to be rid of it. It has never significantly improved anybody's behavior in the so-called ages of faith. People were just as immoral, if not more so than they are today. Because you see, all this fixed notion of God is idolatry. If thou shalt not make to thyself any graven image of anything that is in the heaven above, etc., the most dangerous and pernicious images are not those made of wood or stone. Nobody takes those seriously. They are the images made of the imagination and conception and thought. And that is why, in the fundamental approach to the Godhead, both the Hindu and the Buddhist, and for that matter the Taoist, take what is called the negative approach, which used to be known long ago in the Middle Ages as apophatic theology. As St. Thomas Aquinas said, to proceed to the knowledge of God, it is necessary to go by the way of emotion, of saying what God is not, since God, by His immensity, exceeds every conception to which our intellect can attain. End quote. Hence, we deduce from the last paragraph that even though the word agnosia implies not knowing, it also suggests an underlying paradox which is essential to achieve the knowledge of God. It is by not knowing that one comes to know, and Socrates is a great example in terms of his substantial contributions to philosophy while also admitting to possessing little knowledge. In fact, Apologia is a speech made by Socrates as a defense to his death sentence. One of his statements in that speech goes as follows, I quote, "And this is the point in which, as I think, I am superior to men in general, and in which I might perhaps fancy myself wiser than other men, that whereas I know but little of the world below, I do not suppose that I know." End quote. Notice that Socrates does not claim to be ignorant, rather he claims to know little. His major goal is not to glorify ignorance, but to expose those who profess to know things they don't know. In another statement in the same speech, he says, "Well, although I do not suppose that either of us knows anything really beautiful and good, I am better off than he is, for he knows nothing and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. In this latter particular, then, I seem to have slightly the advantage of him." End quote. According to Socrates and Plato, ignorance is not the enemy of knowledge. It is not shameful to be ignorant. If a person is ignorant and is conscious of it, they might start learning and studying to fill their knowledge gaps and become better people. The real foe of knowledge, however, is the ignorance we don't even recognize or perceive as such. It will be much more difficult for us to improve if we are deluded into believing that we know something that we don't. And this is due to the fact that we would firstly have to acknowledge our ignorance, which is something challenging for us to do. But only then would we be able to study and begin to truly understand anything. So finally, my question is, are you suffering from a theologian agnosia? Or are you so petrified by the idea of an omnipotent force which manifests into the conscious ignorance to discover the truth?